Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I leave the library and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It is just afternoon on Friday, June 13th. It's a lovely sunny day here in suburban Chicago, and I'm walking home from the library with a comic book in one hand and a DVD in the other. I've rented 10 Cloverfield Lane. Somewhere along the line I made the decision to watch the movie Cloverfield, which I had never viewed. And then I've had a journey to do so because it was not available for streaming on any of the services we already pay for. So I requested it from the library, and the copy I get had a damage report on it, but they still checked it out to me. And then I got it home and it was unwatchable, so then I would return it and request another copy, wait for that to come in. It was a whole ordeal. So I finally watched that yesterday, and then I returned it today, and I thought I would just try out all of the Cloverfields, because the first one was pretty interesting. It was amusing. I found footage monster movie. So the second one is called 10 Cloverfield Lane. Apparently has John Goodman in it. I don't know anything about it except that it has John Goodman in it. I didn't even read the back. I'm just taking on faith that I generally enjoy J.J. Abrams' work. He's the producer, so we'll give it a try. But this is not a Brendan's movie viewing podcast. This is a board game podcast. So today, on my walk home from the library, I'll be talking to you about 3 games I've played in the recent past. Each game I've played one time, so these comments are strictly temporary, or should be taken with appropriate numbers of salt grains, because I've only played the game once. In fact, you could say that I'm reacting from the gut, that I'm judging a book by its cover in the first chapter. Or, to use the parlance we've used throughout this podcast, I'm shooting from the hip. That's right, it's a shooting from the hip triple shot. Pow, pow, pow. So, the 3 games that I'm going to be reviewing today are Everdell, Hellboy, the board game, and 20th Century from Vladimir Suchy. Each of these games I will give you a quick discussion of how they work, and then my initial thoughts on the game. Once again, I try not to do reviews on this channel, because as a board game designer, I don't generally think of reviews as a thing that I should be doing, but I think it is interesting to call out highs and lows of my gameplay experiences, which some people might call reviews. I guess the main way I stay away from doing reviews is that I don't put any kind of recommendation on a game. I don't put any kind of number on my experience. So take that for what you will. So first game I want to talk about today is 20th Century. 20th Century is the 3rd game from Vladimir Suchy, the designer of Last Will and Underwater Cities most recently. Vladimir Suchy is one of my favorite designers, probably my number 2 designer after Martin Wallace, and I have purchased more. The only person whose games I have more of are Martin Wallace. I have 7 Vladimir Suchy games, which is all of the Vladimir Suchy games. Hi, pup. And as I've mentioned a number of times, one of my goals this year is to play all of those games within this calendar year. At present, I have played 3 of the 7. Actually 4. I've played 4 of the 7 games. I've played League of Six, Shipyard, 20th Century, and Underwater Cities. So, strictly speaking, I have 3 left to play: Last Will, Prodigal's Club, and Pulsar 2849. And I would also like to play one mega game in which I play Last Will and Prodigal's Club together. I've talked about that a number of times, so I won't bore you anymore. This Tuesday at Toggle Gaming, I had a chance to play 20th Century, which is the Vladimir Suchy game that was next on my list. As I said, it's from 2010. The first observation I had is that it's old enough that it was before people were making how to play videos for games. So there is no how to play video for 20th Century. There are a couple reviews that roughly explain how to play, but there are no direct how to play videos. I prepared to teach, and it went fine. 20th Century, like League of Six before it, is mostly focused on auction and turn order. The central mechanism of the game is 2 auctions in which you are obviously competing with other players to spend your resources to buy tiles and then apply those tiles to your country. The idea of the game is that you're building a country, and as you acquire tiles that are for technology and tiles for land, you acquire the ability to generate technology, to generate coins, which are the 2 currencies in the game, to earn points, and to get rid of garbage. So garbage is the big negative of the game, and the narrative of the story works very much like Brass or other games where you are setting up a system that allows you to take care of the ongoing production of the country. So at the beginning of whenever you buy a land tile, you get a garbage token on it. Whenever you buy technologies, you get garbage tokens on the land tile that you've bought, and those represent the trash being produced by these areas. Then you have to use recycling centers to get rid of that trash. At the end of the game, you score points, and the points determine the winner. Some of the city places create points. Then there's also some scoring cards in the middle and a bunch of scoring conditions at the end. Our game was tight enough that I won by 3 or 4 points out of 100 some. I think I scored 108 and my next competitor scored 104. But you also could have a pretty low game. I think our lowest scorer was in the 60s. So it's a wide range. Like I said, it's an auction game, so you are bidding for the land tiles, and when you choose to stop bidding for the land tiles, you get to buy a technology tile, and then you actually bid on these catastrophes. And the catastrophes are sort of like the bad cards in high society, in that you don't want them, so you pay money to avoid getting them or to get the least bad one. Like League of Six, 20th Century, the catastrophes, everyone has to take one. In League of Six, everyone had to take a city. The idea of negotiating back and forth with each other until everyone has agreed to pay for one of the 5 things is part of the game there. It's a quirky little game. It definitely feels like it's 10 years old in terms of design and in terms of interactivity. It's an interesting game in that the complexity of the game comes from the things you buy rather than the interactions you have. Really, the only interactions you have are these 2 auctions. That you auction for the land tiles, and then you get to buy the technology tiles, and then you auction for the catastrophes. And that's it. So it feels relatively simple, but the interactions are very complex. I would say one of the main downsides is that the game is certainly susceptible to cheating because it's so complex that you might accidentally cheat, but also that when you're resolving things, unless you're going to slow the game down immensely, everybody just sort of resolves stuff on their own board. I guess if you were playing with someone you didn't trust, they could take an extra garbage token off or something, and you wouldn't really know unless you really interrogated them about it. And the game isn't really trackable backwards. That once you've done those things, it's pretty hard to reset and see where you got the points or whatever. But that's a minor complaint for me. Overall, pretty interesting. I doubt it's going to be a game I'm going to play all that often. I certainly didn't like it as much as Shipyard, Last Duel, Prodigal's Club, Pulsar 2849, or Underwater Cities. So anytime I have 2+ hours to play a game, it's probably not going to be 20th Century. But I'm going to hold on to it anyway because the collector in me really likes having the complete set of those games. And it is amusing. It would be fun. If someone said, hey, I want to play it again, I definitely would. So that's 20th Century, Shooting from the Hip, from Vladimir Suchy and CGE Games. Currently out of print, I believe. The next game I wanted to talk about was Hellboy, the board game. This was a big box Kickstarter that I backed a while back, and I backed it sort of with the full idea that it's going to be a kind of brainless dice roller, where the idea is we're playing through a story, we're rolling dice, we're doing actions, but there's not a whole lot to it. And this is certainly the case. Hellboy, the board game, comes out of the same mold as something like Last Night on Earth. It's a game where you are resolving most of the things you do by rolling dice, and the rule book is full of these little corners that you have to understand how to navigate. In our first play, there was an awful lot of looking stuff up because we forgot how things work or couldn't keep track of how things work. That said, it was a really fun version of that kind of game. The dice mechanism is pretty interesting. There's a bunch of different color dice, and your character gets to roll 3 of a particular color to do a particular action, and you can upgrade or downgrade some of those whenever you're doing other actions. It works out pretty nicely, and it's both intuitive and interesting. So the dice mechanisms are good. The models are all lovely. I think the most fun I'm going to have out of it is painting all the models. That's something I'm going to try to get into a bit this summer, is to get painting done again. I want to paint the zombies from Zombie 15 just to kind of get my hand back into it, and then I'll start on the Hellboy models. There's lots of different Hellboys, but also all sorts of monsters that come with it. I don't see it being a game I'm going to play a ton, but I think it'll be fun to break out once a month or so, just to roll some dice and shoot some bad guys. And very thematic and enjoyable. So Hellboy the board game, not probably worth going out of your way if you don't really like the Hellboy theme, but if you like a good dice chucker and you want something thematic, Hellboy is a nice solution to that problem. So that was a quick commentary, but I don't know that there's a lot more to say. So on to the third game. The third game that I wanted to talk about today is one I played over the weekend at BoganCon, which is a in someone's house board game convention that I was invited to. The host of the Board Game Show, which is an occasional podcast out of Verona, Wisconsin. I guess the big rule is in order to go to it, you have to have played a game with him. So I was lucky to play a game with him in this last year, and thus got invited. So it was a really good time. I played a bunch of games over the course of a couple days at BoganCon, but I think the highlight for me in terms of not experience, but because I had a lot of fun all through with the different people I met, but in terms of the game itself, the highlight was Everdell. So Everdell is from Starling Games. It was on Kickstarter last year. The strongest commentary it got early on was that it was pretty. The art is quite lovely. It's got this kind of anthropomorphic art. It reminds me a lot of Dale of Merchants and the other art from Snowdale Design. Sammy Lasco is the artist there. Similar to that, the game comes with a big cardboard tree that's really kind of dumb. It doesn't mean a lot, but it looks fun on the board. And the board itself looks like the forest floor. It's really neat. It's an interesting and solid game, well worth taking a look at, but it's the gameplay that really got me. So the gameplay at the heart of Everdell is an engine building worker placement game. So you have a worker placement game where you're getting resources and acquiring cards, and on your turn you can either place a worker or play a card. So it has this interesting effect of giving you a lot more turns in a round than it seems like it's going to. Because at first you have just a couple workers and it seems like you're going to get 2 or 3 turns and then your round is over. But very quickly the cards start chaining together such that one card will give you some resources which then allow you to pay to play another card. And maybe that card has a chain that allows you to build a third card for free. And so very quickly, I mean, it's played out over 4 rounds in that you're just taking turns, but when you want to, you can reset your workers and pull them back, and then you play them again. It was really interesting. I think I got 3rd place, but I felt pretty good about the experience. I felt like I got it, and if I were to play again and understand a bit more which pieces of the engine score easiest, that I would do better. The biggest thing, and I actually said this a couple times aloud while we were playing, is that the game does exactly what I think all the best heavy games do, which is it crushes you, it squeezes your heart with that feeling of, I don't have quite enough and I want to do one more thing. I've mentioned this a number of times as something I really enjoy about a variety of different games, and Everdell does it in spades. I don't think I'm going to seek it out to buy Everdell because I have a lot of other games that already do that and I don't play those enough, but it was really quite enjoyable and I definitely would play it again if the opportunity presented itself. So if you have access to a copy of Everdell and would like to give it a try, I strongly recommend it. It's very entertaining. Really thinky though. The biggest surprise for it is that, like I said, you start with, I think, 3 workers, and then when you run out of your 3, you get a 4th, and when you run out of your 4th, you get a 5th and 6th, or maybe you get a 4th and 5th, and then when you run out of those, you get a 6th, and then when you run out of that, you get a 7th. So in the last round, maybe you have 7 workers. In the first round, you just had 3. And after the first, even the second set, like when you're pulling back the second set and you're getting 5 back, it feels kind of disheartening, especially if you know sort of what the end game state is supposed to look like. But boy howdy, by the time I got to the end of the 3rd round and I was pulling back my workers for the last time, I really felt like it was ramping up dramatically. So that was quite a nice treat. So that's Everdell. So the 3 games, we have Hellboy, we have Everdell, and we have 20th Century from Vladimir Suchy. I hope that you've found this conversation entertaining and edifying. I'm now walking toward the construction equipment, so I'm going to sign off. What have you been playing lately? Pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let us know your recent games and shoot from the hip for us about those. Until then, I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. It piles up, or it starts. Hey, puppy. Hey. Hey. Hi. And over the course of a couple days, hey, puppy.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.